Welcome to everybody. I'm Paul Root-Wolpe. I'm the director of the Center for Ethics here at Emory. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here for the Center for the Goizueta Business School and for Emory University. It's a delight to see so many people here this morning. I think this is going to be an interesting and fun program, so I'm glad you could make it. The Center for Ethics at Emory University is a unique resource for Atlanta. And I just want to say a quick word about it because one of the challenges of running a center like ours is it's not intuitive to most people what a Center for Ethics is and what we do. And even if it was, we're not like other centers. So the Center for Ethics at Emory is one of the largest centers for ethics in the United States. It is, most ethics centers in the United States are bioethics centers because most of the money for ethics in the United States is in medicine and life science. Our center is not a bioethics center, though we have an extraordinary bioethics program, one of the best in the country. But we're an ethics center. So we do business ethics and legal ethics and ethics of journalism and sport and ethics of civil life and politics and whatever it is that we think needs to be examined. And the approach we take is a very applied approach. We're not a theoretical center. My definition of ethics, my sort of quick definition of ethics, is how we assess, determine, and express our values in the world. And every institution, whether it's a business or a healthcare institution, is based on some set of values, either explicit or implicit. And part of what our center tries to do is help people make their values explicit and then help them find ways to live by those values or to resolve conflicts about those values in institutions. We have an extraordinary set of programs. We have programs like this where we partner with businesses and with Goizueta and with wonderful organizations like Conscious Capitalism. We have an Ethics in the Arts program where we partner with the Woodruff Arts Center, Wonder Root Community Arts Groups, and other arts groups, the High Museum around the city, and we use art as a vehicle to talk about ethics. We have an Ethics and Servant Leadership program run by Edward Queen, who's here somewhere, back there. Hi, Edward. Where we train students on how to go into the community and lead from an ethic of service. And it's an extraordinary program, and students who come through that program are disproportionately end up being leaders in not-for-profits, business, healthcare, and other fields. I strongly encourage you to take a look at ethics.emory.edu, our website. We have programs like this. A couple of weeks ago, we had a program where we brought Andrew Young and Ross Rawson, one of the world's premier portrait artists, together at the Schwartz Center in conversation. We called it Ultimately Human. Ross's amazing portraits, these giant portraits that look like photographs that he paints, were behind them, and they use those portraits as a vehicle to discuss our common humanity. Not long ago, we brought in John Brennan, former director of the CIA, to talk about how do you run an ethical clandestine organization. Sorry you missed that. He was really fascinating. How do you run an ethical organization that lies a lot? And the truth is he has a very strong ethical compass. He was a philosophy major at Fordham, and he cared a lot about making the CIA more ethical. And it was fascinating to hear how he did that. So those are just a few examples. We are very involved in bringing in the Dalai Lama when he comes. There's a really great program that's going to happen in the fall. I can't tell you about it yet, but you will see it if you'll want to come to it, trust me. So come to our website, see the extraordinary programs we do. Also understand, since most of you are from the business community, we have an organizational and corporate ethics program where we try to run public programs like this, and also where we come into businesses or bring businesses into our center to train boards, senior management in ethical decision making. When you are, I'll tell you one secret of ethics that just this one, it's not something we don't know, but it's something we don't think of explicitly. And I've seen the light bulb come on over people's heads when I say this, And that is, most of us think of ethics as about, it's what we were taught from when we were kids, how to determine what's wrong and right, how to determine the difference between right decisions and wrong decisions. And I'm here to tell you that's not what ethics is 95% of the time, at least not in adults. That's what we teach our kids. Don't steal, don't bite, don't kick. But when you have an adult ethical decision, it is almost always between two right things in conflict, not between a right thing and a wrong thing. And if you think about it that way, it's about two values in conflict. I taught in medical schools my whole life. Should I do what the patient wants me to do, the very positive value of autonomy, or should I do what I think is in his or her best interest, the very important value of beneficence? It's two desirable things in conflict. That's what an ethical dilemma is. And what we're skilled at is helping people think through those kinds of dilemmas and come to decisions about how do you adjudicate values in conflict. So I just wanted to give people a little sense of what we do, because I'm not sure people really understand how we do it. And particularly in today's environment, whatever your perspective is, there's no question about the fact that we are in an ethically fraught time today. And we see it in our kids here at Emory when they come in. They're confused, and they're not really sure how to negotiate that difficult ethical landscape. And our center, which is an independent center at the university under the provost, it's not in a school, it's very rare that way, has the flexibility and the freedom to take really innovative steps to try to help people negotiate those difficult dilemmas. So I want to thank you all for being here. Very quickly, I want to thank the staff of the Center for Ethics. I want to thank Allison Keir, Paige Williams, and Jennifer Harris. As you all know, doing something like this takes time and energy and coordinating attention, so I want to thank them. I want to thank our partners, Conscious Capitalism, Jim Hartsfield and Chris Hooper, and for them I want to thank Patty Tucker and Courtney Counts, who have been really wonderful partners in this. This is the first program we've done with Conscious Capitalism. It will not be the last. It's a real wonderful synergy, I think, that we have discovered here in the work that we do and the work that Conscious Capitalism does. So thank you all for being here, and I'd like to call up Jim Hartsfield.
Well, good morning. Could it be a more beautiful spring day in Atlanta? And you all are here. Well, it's a great venue, too. Also, I just wanted to highlight, were some of you able to see the debate last night on the ethics of eating animals? John was one of the highlights of that, and for that, we've had a nice vegan breakfast. What did you think about that? Was that good? Was that good? Well, I'm really excited about this and representing kind of all the Conscious Capitalism of Atlanta team. We just call it the CCATL, is a short way of saying that long thing. But this is actually our third and biggest event so far. August of 2016, somebody I'd like to highlight, Carlos Bremer. Carlos, raise his hand. And another friend of ours, Claude, we met, sat down for lunch, and we realized, why isn't there a Conscious Capitalism chapter in Atlanta? And that day we decided to make one. About a year later, we had an event at Super Jenny's in a very steamy August evening. I see some heads. Who was at Super Jenny's? That was our kickoff event. We were blown away by the energy and enthusiasm, and we were really, really lucky. For our first event, we had one of the other co-founder of Conscious Capitalism there, Raj Sisodia. So we kicked off with Raj Sisodia. Our second event was in November at SCAD Show. Who attended SCAD Show event in November? And it was a Barry Waymiller story about why people matter. It was a great program. And now here we are, our third event, and we get the other co-founder of Conscious Capitalism. I understand John doesn't do a whole lot of chapter events, so this is really a treat for everyone. So, but beyond John being here, as Paul said, one of the things I'm most excited about is this an example of the kind of partnerships and relationships that's going to make this move. It's already moving in Atlanta. We have a heritage of companies that have thought this way, but as a person that spent 20 years working very closely with a guy named Ray Anderson at Interface, particularly back in the 90s, trying to think about how do you transform a traditional company into these kind of ideas, we would have died to have had Conscious Capitalism as a book, the frameworks, the ideas expressed. We could have got there so much further, so much faster from that. But now that stuff is accumulating and is accessible. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to bring business people together and inspire them and educate them. First of all, that this is, as Ray Anderson said, this is a better way to make a bigger buck. It's not about corporate philanthropy. You know, obviously good companies are generous, but this is a better way to make a bigger buck. So we're really excited that you all are here. I wanted to mention a couple of other things. First of all, we do have a couple of books in the background. I don't see Jag Sheth. Did he make it here? I don't think he did. But Jag is a professor at the Goizueta Business School. Really excited about their sponsorship here. Well, he happened to be one of the co-authors with Raj Sisodia of the predecessor to Conscious Capitalism, Firms of Endearment. So we've got a few of those books there. Also, he started, I'm all getting a sign from the crowd here, the head table, saying, also a reminder that we have the Eating Ethically book in the back, and also Conscious Capitalism. So if you're interested in picking up some of these on the way out to learn more, please do. Let's see, what else do I have? Obviously, our sponsors, again, I really wanted to thank them. It was great to co-host this. This came about from being on a board and hearing that John was coming into town. We thought, oh my gosh, if John's going to be here, we got to do something else. So it was just, you know, even some of those personal connections that allow things like this to happen. So excited about the partnership with the Center for Ethics. Goizueta Business School is really the main big sponsor, the biggest sponsor of this event, so definitely want to thank them. The Venturing and Emerging Brands Group of Coca-Cola, thank you for your support, and check out some of their products back there. And certainly as Keenan Howett here from the Emory Sustainability Initiatives Group, they're also a sponsor. Paul mentioned these folks, but could I have the board members for Conscious Capitalism raise your hand? Because at the end of this, you may want to get involved. You can talk to them. There's Chris Hooper, you'll see in a minute, Patty Tucker, Carlos Bremer, and Courtney Counts is at the very back there. He's manning the book table right now. But if you're interested in getting involved, it's fun. We have a bunch of social events as well, which sometimes are more important than the substantive ones. So talk with us afterwards. So again, thank you for being here. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful idea. I'm going to bring up Chris Hooper right now, which is our board chair for Conscious Capitalism. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to get right to the program as soon as possible here, even though I just dropped the discussion guide. But again, just to echo what Paul and Jim said, thanks for the support of sponsors and everyone here. It's great to see a full room, a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new folks here as well, which is great to see more folks get a chance to learn more about conscious capitalism from really good sources and how you can help to elevate humanity through business. You know, the late night TV host always say, we got a great show for you tonight. Sometimes yes, sometimes not really. I think we have a really great program this morning, and let me give you a very brief overview of what we're going to do, what you're going to see. We have a special guest who is literally the most qualified person on this planet to talk about conscious capitalism, how it originated, what it is, what the beliefs are, and we want to emphasize a little bit on one of the core beliefs, which is on higher purpose. And then bring up a panel of 3 Atlanta business leaders who lead through purpose from very different perspectives of how they approach it or how they play a role with purpose in their organizations to share their insights about purpose-driven business and the values that come from it. But to start, I'm going to ask Wayne Silverman to do the honor of introducing our special guest. Wayne and John Mackey have known each other for 40 years, which means they met in a sandbox in Austin, Texas, I think. But it's a very special relationship that actually let this program come about today. So I'd like Wayne to introduce John Mackey.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning. So I'm Wayne Silverman. I'm the Director of Development for the Center for Ethics, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you and to introduce John. Our lives have intersected many times over the past 40 years. And a mutual friend connected us through playing cards and sports together. Last summer, Jonathan and I went to Austin and met with John, and he graciously agreed to come here to do a debate with our students, which happened last night. And then, as Jim mentioned, I happened to be discussing it with Paul and Jim Hartzfeld that John was going to be here, and he said that why not do a program together. When I met John in '78, he was just about opening a new store called Safer Way, with a grocery on the main floor and a really amazing restaurant on the second floor. 2 years later, with some friends, they merged Safer Way with another store to form the first Whole Foods in Austin, Texas. At that time, there were only a handful of natural and organic full grocery stores in the country, but what John and his friends created was a new model that really didn't exist. And what it did radically changed the world. It changed how we eat, how we shop, how we grow, how we harvest, how we engage local farmers. It immediately became a focal point for many in Austin, and we really recognized that something different was happening. John took that vision of how a world could relate to food and eating and kept it growing. He and his colleagues created their declaration of interdependence that has guided the company since the 80s. His team structure created employees that were totally dedicated to that vision. And until today, if you go into a Whole Foods and ask someone where you can find something on a shelf, you know that they take you to that item. They don't tell you where to go. From the beginning, John has engaged and empowered female partners and executives. For example, for 12 years in the 90s, I ran an international herbal medicine education organization in Austin, and with its founder. And Whole Foods was the first to license our vast online content in order to provide their customers with independent science-based information about the use of medicinal herbs instead of just the structure function claims that are permitted by the government. This was through the vision of Margaret Wittenberg, the Global Vice President of Quality Standards and Public Affairs, and she's been an executive at Whole Foods since the founding and is in the Whole Foods Market Hall of Fame. She was trusted by John to keep legal and regulatory standards high on the Whole Foods Market agenda. Now Whole Foods Market has 475 stores, about $17 billion in revenue, and 90,000 team members around the world. It's still alive and growing. And in fact, we're going to get a new Whole Foods Market 365 store in Decatur later this year, and it's all continuing under his leadership. Perhaps you're not aware of the fact that along the way, he took those values and ethics and created other structures as well. The Whole Planet Foundation provides microloans to women around the world who create their own businesses. The Whole Kids Foundation is devoted to improving children nutrition and ending childhood obesity. And then regarding conscious capitalism, in 2005, the Freedom Lights Our World was founded by John and Michael Strong. Raj Sisodia and Jag Sheth and David Wolf published Firms of Endearment, and then John published a paper called Conscious Capitalism, creating a new paradigm for business. In 2008, the first Conscious Capitalism conference was held. And then in 2010, Flow and Conscious Capitalism Alliance and Conscious Capitalism Institute all merged together to form Conscious Capitalism Inc. Then in 2012, it was mentioned that John and Raj published the landmark Conscious Capitalism, Liberating the Heroic Spirit of Business. As co-founder of Conscious Capitalism, he outlined a new way of running businesses that are socially responsible, and now there are Conscious Capitalism chapters around the world, including this new one in Atlanta. Even now, through the transition to his partnership with Amazon, John is able to continue to have the company reflect his values as a new way of, and continue his new way of thinking about food, eating, and shopping. This new way will be unfolding in some unknown way that will evolve over the next few years. So through the 4 decades I've known John, he's always been radically alive in everything he does, and it's my honor to present my friend and disc golf buddy, John Mackey. All right, am I live? Whoa!
morning again, everyone. So, John, thanks again for joining us here this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
Adjust these chairs to be comfortable. But in the introduction of the book Conscious Capitalism, you relate a story about events that occurred in Austin, Texas around Memorial Day weekend 1981 that you said profoundly changed your way of thinking about business, was pivotal for Whole Foods, and really put you on a path that's kind of cultivated in conscious capitalism. Can you share that experience and the impact it had on you?
I'm getting older, so it's hard to remember that far back. But, I mean, Wayne recounted that we'd had a small store called Saferway. It was small, it was very pure. And then with Whole Foods, it also did very little business. And we relocated it, merged with another company, and started the first Whole Foods back in 1980. And that quickly became the highest volume natural food store in the United States and probably the world within just a few months of being open. I was kind of blown away by it. And it's like we had a flood. We had built the first Whole Foods market in the 100-year floodplain. And I was trying to understand what it meant. What do you mean a 100-year floodplain? And they said, well, about once every 100 years, there's going to be a flood that's going to wipe out this store. And I thought, once every 100 years, I can live with that. Except it was in the very first year. We had the 100-year flood. And the store was, we were out of business right when the dream was really beginning to get unfolded. But we didn't die. I mean, we were bankrupt, but we were saved by our stakeholders. I didn't have the language then that I have today. I didn't know what stakeholders were. But the day after the flood, we came in to start cleaning up the store, and besides team members there was all these other people that were there cleaning up the store, and it's like I recognized them kind of vaguely, but I knew they didn't work for us. And they were customers, and they were neighbors, and they just said, we're not going to let this store die. This store's too important in the community. And then what happened over the next few weeks was sort of amazing. Not only did the customers and the neighbors come in, pitch in and help us clean up the store, but the wonderful suppliers in our natural foods community fronted us new inventory, and we weren't sure we could pay for it. We had our employees did work for free while we were rebuilding the store, and they couldn't be certain we would get open to repay them. The bank loaned us more money, and there's a good story about that in the sense that, I thought they loaned this money on my signature. But many years later, I found out from a guy who says, yeah, we made a loan to you guys back after that flood. It kind of saved you guys. And he says, boy, that banker really liked you guys. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, Mark, I mean, he co-signed that loan. And I said, what do you mean he co-signed that loan? I said, I signed the loan. He said, nobody thought your signature was worth anything. Mark put his own reputation and his own money on the line with the bank. And I mean, that's just amazing. And our investors put more money in, so the stakeholders didn't let us die. And I've kind of been trying to pay them back ever since. I mean, a business is a community of people that work together to create value for other people. It's one of the most beautiful things in the world. I got it early, mostly because business success can breed hubris and overconfidence. You meet entrepreneurs all the time that think they're smarter and better than other people. There's nothing like getting your face slammed into the dirt or almost drowned, waterboarding, that gets you to rethink what business is all about.
Great. So that got you thinking about what became conscious capitalism. What is conscious capitalism today? Can you define what it is and what its purpose is?
I mean, the surface meaning is it's just doing business in a more conscious way. And that we have specific meanings in the book, so we identify the 4 tenets that we think are most important. The first one is higher purpose. And every business has its potential for higher purpose. And if you ask what the higher purpose for business is, the default answer you'll hear is, what do you mean? Everybody knows the purpose of business. The purpose of business is to make money. Isn't that how it's usually portrayed? And then unfavorably, because business people are seen as greedy and selfish, and all they care about is money. And yet, if you think about all the other professions, what's the purpose of a doctor? They make a lot of money. but their purpose is to heal people. Teachers educate. Engineers construct buildings, architects design things. Every one of the professions refers back to some type of value creation for other people, except for business, the greatest value creator in the world. And it's mostly because the enemies of business have defined it in this narrow fashion of being greedy and selfish. But business is somewhat bought into the argument because profit is so important. But as one of my friends, Ed Freeman, one of the big influences of conscious capitalism because he's the father of stakeholder theory, as Ed says, you know, I have to make red blood cells to live. If I don't make red blood cells, I'm going to die. But it doesn't logically follow because I need red blood cells to live that the purpose of my life is to produce red blood cells. No. Similarly, business needs to make money or it'll die. The profits are like the red blood cells. But that doesn't follow that's the purpose of business and why it exists. So that's the first big insight of conscious capitalism is find your higher purpose and begin to articulate it because we'll never change the negative narrative about business unless we talk about purpose and the value that we're creating and how we're helping make the world a better place, how we're helping elevate humanity. And then the stakeholders are the second tenet, that we create businesses not just for the shareholders, we primarily create them for the customers because they're the ones where we can't exist without customers. And then we can't create value for customers without employees who I think are fulfilled in their work. You're going to get far better results when people are excited and motivated and loyal and committed. And I've heard earlier today, we're talking about leadership. That's the third pillar. A servant leadership, a leadership devoted, as Paul said, to service. That is, instead of self-aggrandizement, instead of it's all about me, it's about service to that greater community. And then creating cultures, the fourth pillar, the cultures that allow human beings to flourish, that allow us to reach our highest potential in life. I mean, we think about all the hours of our lives we devote to work. And for those not to be places where people can learn and grow and flourish, it's kind of a crime. We need to create workplaces that really, really let human beings be fully who they can possibly be.
Great. Thanks for that, John. Can you talk a bit about the higher purpose of Whole Foods and how it's evolved over time and what role it's played in your success?
I think most businesses have higher purposes, but they're not always, they're tacit frequently. They're not been made explicit. And the entrepreneurs generally, I've known a lot of entrepreneurs, there's entrepreneurs in this room. Entrepreneurs tend to be people that are trying to create something. They're very passionate people generally. And they're on fire about something they want to create in the world. And they're usually, they're pragmatic doing people as opposed to intellectuals that try to figure things out. They're out there doing stuff. But they have this feeling or this intuition or this something that's driving them. So businesses discover its purpose when the entrepreneur becomes conscious enough to begin to make explicit what has always been tacit and can articulate it. So what's interesting with Whole Foods right now is that our higher purpose has evolved. I mean, the initial higher purpose of Whole Foods was very simple, which was, we want to sell healthy food to people, earn a living, and have some fun. And guess what? We're still doing all of those things. It's still there. But we've had to rethink our higher purpose a few times. It got more complex over the years and complicated. With the Amazon merger, part of what you do in a successful merger is you have to integrate with the other company. Whole Foods has bought 23 companies, so I've had to integrate on the other side. But part of that is defining, like, a merger is kind of like a good marriage. If you think about probably most people here are married. If you think about, some of you are married multiple times. If you think about what leads to a happy marriage, in my experience, there's going to be the importance of the me to flourish, the importance of you to flourish, but then there's a shared self that we're creating together. There's a we. So in a healthy merger, particularly when, Whole Foods is a very big company. We were, Wayne talked about how big we are, but we're small compared to Amazon. And then they're the second highest valued corporation in the entire world. Amazon, if you go back to 2010, they had 30,000 people working there in 2010. They have 700,000 now. That's what you call exponential growth. And so Whole Foods has to define partly what we're not and partly who we are. And to juxtapose those things. We've had to go back and search our souls. We've done retreats. We've re-examined our higher purpose to ask our questions. How are we not going to change? Here's how we will change. In a marriage, you change. If you want to stay married, you're going to change. You're going to evolve. You're going to learn and grow. You're going to make some compromises. You're going to just try new things, and that's part of the shared journey you're doing together. Well, Amazon's changing Whole Foods, but there's some things that are not for change. They're not going to change. And so we've had to go back and re-examine our Declaration of Interdependence. We reworked it. We reworked our higher purpose. We've reworked our core values, simplified them. And by the way, Amazon is a very conscious company. And the deeper I get into them, I just cannot believe what you read in the media. I asked Paul yesterday, do you have journalism ethics? Because they're largely lacking in our society, in my experience. But one thing you should Google is just Google Amazon's leadership principles. Just read their leadership principles. If those don't inspire you, and that's what they're all about. They've been able to grow that company around those leadership principles. So now to answer your question with all that background, sorry about that. Our higher purpose, which we've just kind of reworked, it's simple, but there's depth to it, which is our purpose is to nourish people and the planet. And obviously the key word there is nourish, because there's a depth to that. Obviously, as food retailers, nourishment is in that essence. But the nourish people and the planet creates all the other scope where conscious capitalism exists. Nourishing people, helping them learn and grow, helping them evolve, helping them be happy, the planet, our environmental responsibilities, as well as the global human community, all part of what Whole Foods' higher purpose is.
Great, thanks.
Sorry.
It's okay, no apologies. You mentioned the stakeholder orientation and this declaration of interdependence at Whole Foods, which to me is one of the better examples of really bringing that stakeholder orientation to life and all of Ed Freeman's principles and making it a codified part of the company. Can you talk a bit more about that Declaration of Interdependence and how it works and what it commits the company to do?
We wrote the Declaration of Interdependence back in 1985. So if you go online, we've just reworked it. And if you go online on our website, you can get the Declaration, you can get our higher purpose, you can get Whole Foods' core values, which took 13 of the 14 Amazon core values, threw out one of them. And I think I'm going to put it back as I get deeper into it. I've seen the wisdom of that one. But, and then Whole Foodized them, in a sense, changed the language to make them consistent with who we are as people, and then added 4 that are essential to Whole Foods market. But the Declaration first came about in 1985 because we were growing. We'd opened our 5th store. We'd gone to Houston, Texas, out of Austin. We'd expanded there. And entrepreneurs, again, need to begin to make things more explicit. So the Declaration was our attempt to codify who we were, what our values were, so we could explain it to the world and we could explain it to ourselves internally. So in that Declaration, we also, our core values come out of that, which is we sell the highest natural and organic foods in the world, which satisfy and delight our customers. We give our team members opportunities to grow and learn. We create win-win partnerships with our suppliers. We create wealth through profits and growth. And those are the core values of Whole Foods that we built the company around. And they've been there since 1985, so that's 33 years.
You mentioned win-win partnerships, and I think one of the assumptions that traditional business has is that if someone wins, someone's got to lose. The choices that managers make are if, then, or and, or in many ways that a business manager's job is to identify trade-offs and make them. But you really argue that that's a false dichotomy and that win-win is possible and there's value in that. Can you go a little deeper into that notion?
Chris has just kind of hit, I think, like that's in some ways that's the most important, besides purpose, that's the most important idea I think that Conscious Capitalism tries to articulate. And the metaphors that we use to think about business are mostly outdated. We need new metaphors. Because think about the three leading sources of metaphors that we use to think about business. First is war. We're going to kill those guys. We're going to crush our competition. Those guys are dead meat. Let's roll. A lot of war metaphors. Or they're sports metaphors. We're winners. They're losers. Get over it. And we're celebrating wins, and and in sports metaphors and war metaphors, there's no win-win there. Somebody's conquering somebody else. And the third, we have the Darwinian metaphors. Survival of the fittest. It is a jungle out there. Only the paranoid survive. And the problem with these metaphors is they structure the way we think about reality. And so trade-offs and somebody winning and someone else losing, it just seems very natural to the way we think about things, because that's the way we do think. Those are the metaphors that we think the way the world works. But business really doesn't work that way. The metaphors really don't fit business very well, because business is about creating value for other people. If you take an exploitative win-lose attitude with your customers, you're going to have a crummy business, because you have to take care of your customers. They have to feel like you care about them, that you're creating value for them. That's the secret to business success, really, is. And one of the things I love about Amazon and why the partnership is going so well so far, Amazon's highest purpose is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. And honestly, as far as I can see, they are. I've never seen a company. They put customers first and design everything in the business model backwards from the customer. Amazon thinks about press releases, and then how does it benefit the customer? And if it doesn't make clear benefits for the customers, they don't do it. So I think I lost my train of thought.
So let me spur it with this. I think you're on a great track, though. But so the idea that if I'm going to increase employee salary, I'm going to pay my employees better, then I must have to either squeeze a supplier or cut costs somewhere else or make less money. It's going to be a loss.
Because, again, I got carried away by the metaphors.
That's what I'm here for.
But there's a method in that madness, which is the big idea. One of the big ideas in conscious capitalism is that in the stakeholder model, in the stakeholder theory, we should be seeking strategies that allow everyone to simultaneously win. And that goes against the win-lose metaphors of war and sports and Darwin. But it's very consistent with the way business intrinsically is structured to flourish. Capitalism is not a win-lose game. It is a win-win game. Humanity is moving upwards. It is flourishing. Business is driving it. We're the heroes of the story. And yet we put ourselves in this box, do our own thinking and our own framework, which really limits our potential and limits the potential of people to understand business in a sympathetic light. We're the ones that create value for customers, for employees, for suppliers, for our investors, for the communities that we're part of. That's amazing. That is simply amazing. We're doing all of those things. So why not, when we come up with structures or strategies that have losers, that you're doing trade-offs, we just haven't been imaginative enough. We've settled. And what I've learned is you don't have to. You can always go back and create new strategies where everybody wins. So at Whole Foods, when I'm faced with these inevitable trade-offs, and by the way, sometimes your imagination fails you, but once you give yourself permission to always think for the win-win-win strategy, guess what? Your mind begins to come up with those strategies. It's amazing. And once you become more skilled at it, you just naturally hold all the stakeholders in your mind, and you can instantly kind of dial through it. Oh, that's going to be bad. Yeah, that's going to be bad for our team members. Yeah, we're not going to do that one. That's not going to work. We're going to have to think of it a different way. Or we're not going to screw our suppliers like that. And by the way, screwing suppliers is one of the hardest things people in conscious capitalism have to learn, because it's so tempting to just ratchet down, or you can get something else from the suppliers. Those set off negative feedback loops, though, that come back to haunt you later on. You need to make sure your suppliers are flourishing too, because they're helping you to flourish. There needs to be that win-win relationship. And I think the supplier stakeholders are one of the least appreciated and one of the most misunderstood of the stakeholders. So anyway, we come up with strategies where those trade-offs are lessened and hopefully completely eliminated. And when you have those trade-offs, chances are you just haven't been creative enough. You haven't worked at it hard enough. Go back and try again. And you'll be surprised when you give yourself permission to come up with win-win-win strategies, you will.
Yeah. I think I've heard you and Raj Sisodia both say that if you look for a trade-off, you'll find a trade-off.
Yeah,
If
because
you
they're
look
out
for
there.
a win-win, it may be harder, it may take a little more work, but it's there if you're looking for it.
Yeah, conscious capitalism this is a harder path. It's a harder path. It requires you to think about all these stakeholders. It requires you to see it as a system that's interdependent and connected. And it means rejecting the simple trade-off solutions that quickly pop into your brain and look for a deeper, more lasting win-win-win strategy.
Great. So another tenet of conscious capitalism is conscious leadership. And leadership is probably the most talked about thing that's ever been written in business. A million books, seminars, gurus on leadership. Can you talk a bit about conscious leadership as you define it and how it's different from or even similar to some of the prior views of leadership?
I'm in the early stages of writing a new book called Conscious Leadership. So, well, it's pretty new. So, I think that the aspects of conscious leadership that we outline in the book, first it starts out with recognizing that there are different kinds of intelligences, that IQ, the analytical intelligence, is I call it the ante in the game. If you have to be pretty smart and to be successful in business, and so we got to take that one for granted in a way. Again, a company like Amazon is hiring. I'm always amazed at just how many smart people work with Amazon, and those, 700,000 people, 600,000 of them are like super brilliant. It's incredible, but there are other emotional intelligence is extremely important. Social intelligence is very important. Spiritual intelligence is very important, and one that that'll be coming in the new book that we're going to emphasize is cultural intelligence. Our nation is racked by confusions about relationships between the different cultural values, and so these cultures are battling for each other. Traditional values, modernist values, and postmodern values are struggling to dominate the American framework, and it's poisoning our relationships. And so cultural intelligence is an increasingly important one. And then we really emphasize the idea of servant leadership. Once you get service, and service just makes you happy. I don't know how else to put it. That's the self-interested part of service. Those of you that are parents, serve your children. So you're servant leaders, hopefully, if you're good parents with your kids. But in business, I think the best leaders are those who serve. They serve the higher purpose. They serve the stakeholders. They serve their teams. They're about helping the organization to flourish at a higher level. That's servant leadership. And I don't know of anything that's been more rewarding. I mean, I've been doing it for 40 years, so I haven't taken any compensation in 12 years. So it's about service. And by stopping taking all compensation, I can make it really clear to myself and to everyone else that it was about that. So you've got to see it. I can't help you see it, but ultimately service is deeply rewarding to you personally as well as obviously good for your organization.
Great. Often people look at conscious capitalism and say, sounds great, nice theory, it's idealistic, and admire the idealism in many ways, but contend that sooner or later the real world is going to come along, a aggressive, smart company that plays by traditional rules, and the real world would kind of overcome that idealism of conscious capitalism, and that
Well, that's a very
it'd be a winner and a loser.
cynical worldview, I'd have to say. But
Right. So how do you answer that that view, or what do you think is the argument that conscious capitalism can overcome and survive?
I mean, it works better. I mean, honestly, it's a higher operating model. It's not easy. It's not a simple solution. But businesses that are more conscious, they're just more sustainable. They're going to make more profits in the long run. You're going to end up having, take a retail business as a simple example. At Whole Foods, we know that we have to create value for our customers, so we make our customers our most important stakeholder. And then, but how can you make your customers happy and satisfied if the people that are serving them are unhappy? So it's like, okay, we've got to make the team members happy. Well, so then our management's job is to hire the best people we can find, train them very well, but then help them to be happy in the workplace. And then they will make the customers happy, and the customers will make the investors happy. It's an interdependency, and it's a continual feedback loop. Suppliers are in there, investors are in there. All the stakeholders are sort of intertwined, and they're interdependent on each other. That means you manage your business system in a more conscious way, and that results in higher long-term success. And that's the payoff in a way from a financial standpoint. And you know, I mean, the reason I think conscious capitalism is going to spread, it may not be called conscious capitalism per se, but these ideas are going to spread, it's because they work better. And young entrepreneurs are starting out with them increasingly from the very beginning. It gives you competitive advantage. If you can really implement the principles of conscious capitalism and run your business that way, you're more likely to win in the marketplace. In using the sports metaphors, your business is more likely to be highly successful because these ideas work. They really do.
Okay. Let me ask kind of the same type thing from a different perspective. There are a lot of companies that people look at and say, that's a good company. I think all of us use that term. It's a good company. They pay their people reasonably well, have a successful business strategy, they're profitable, they're ethical in their dealings, they can give back to the community. It's a good company, but it's not really a company that would meet the conscious capitalism principles as you've outlined it. What would you say to a company like that of what their opportunity is to adhere more to stakeholder, to conscious leadership, to purpose, to perform even better?
Well, first of all, most businesses are good. Right. I want to be clear, I reject the business is greedy, selfish, and exploitative explanation. I don't think that's true. I think most businesses are fundamentally good because we're creating value for other people, and it's based on voluntary exchange. So I don't like the idea that there's a few businesses that are conscious and good and everybody else is the benighted, ignorant, evil businesses. Business is good. We just can make it more, we can make it better. We can make it more conscious. We can take it to a higher vibration, a higher level. And I don't have to, you know, ultimately, Raj and I wrote Conscious Capitalism, and we started this movement really to appeal to younger entrepreneurs. You know, when people get past a certain age, and the old dogs don't learn any new tricks. Particularly if they've been successful in business, they already think they know everything. But people just starting out, they're like sponges. They're open-minded. They're willing to learn new things. And one thing you can say is that the business world is evolving at an incredibly rapid rate. The type of businesses that flourished 20 or 30 years ago, they're like dinosaurs now. I just said Amazon went from 30,000 people to 700,000 people in 8 years. I mean, look at Google, and a lot of the companies you most admire didn't even exist 20 years ago. The world is changing at an ever-accelerating rate. So I don't think it's worth my time, and probably not worth your time, to try to persuade businesses to make a shift. You lead by example. You go out and show what's possible. You build your businesses. You network with others that share your values. And then the young entrepreneurs they're going to take over the ideas that work. And these ideas do work, and they're the ones that are going to change the world. I don't have to go around banging on the doors trying to convert Fortune 100 companies to become more conscious. New CEOs will come in later, and they'll take those ideas with them, and they'll begin to change those companies.
Great. Thank you, John. I'd like to bring the panel up now, but thanks for those comments. Let's give John a hand. Thank you. All right, I'd like to ask our three panelists to join us on stage. And thank you. Cheryl Grice, who is the Southeast Advisory Managing Partner for Ernst & Young. Hi, Cheryl. This is Alex Wagner, doing a do-si-do here. Alex has one of my favorite titles ever. She is the Chief Purpose Ambassador for SunTrust Bank. And Shane Jackson, who is the President of Jackson Healthcare. Great, thank you. Pull to the side here. So let me start with Cheryl, if I may. Cheryl, you told me a story a few weeks ago about your journey in purpose started with an internal project at Ernst & Young that you were at the center of to develop purpose for your firm. That had the outcome of a transformation of Ernst & Young and also kind of a side benefit you didn't expect of a new innovation and consulting practice where you work with your customers or your clients on purpose and how they activate purpose. Can you kind of talk about that journey and the work you do in purpose today?
I can. As soon as I turn myself on here.
Everybody turn themselves on.
There we go. I'm amazed that I'm sitting next to John Mackey, and he just said, everybody turn yourself on. Thank you for that quote.
There's probably some media that's going to make that happen.
I joined EY in 2012, and I had a long career helping companies transform their business. And when I joined, I was asked to help our chairman, our new chairman, Mark Weinberger, and CEO, fundamentally launch a new strategy for our firm and roll out this new purpose of building a better working world. Very exciting challenge for me, quite an honor to be asked, and went through all the regular things that I'd learned in business school, putting together the project plan, figuring out how to really activate a strategy, figuring out all the things that were necessary to move a partnership that at the time was made up of 156,000 people around the world. And I brought this very elaborate plan back to my CEO and said, look, this is how we're going to reach our aspirations as defined by Vision 2020. And one of the things, I was a disciple of John Cotter, and one of the things I said is we really need to establish this sense of urgency. And urgency was defined by crisis back when I started this and the things that I espoused and taught. And he looked at me and he goes, so how do you want us to do this? And I suggested that we look for a way to establish some kind of crisis that would be looming in the future. And he goes, we don't have a crisis. And I said, well, we have to figure out a way to put a crisis in place. And he goes, but we don't have a crisis. I don't want to put a crisis in place. That's not how I want to lead this. What I really want to do is inspire our people to build a better working world, to move from this crisis environment, which was created by the whole Sarbanes-Oxley fallout from Enron, where one of our chief competitors completely went out of business. He said, that's what has been inspiring us to date, was to protect rather than to build something that was incredible for the future. So I went back, got my team to look at this. We did a lot of research, and we looked at companies that were truly purposeful. And there wasn't a lot of research to fall back on, and we started to look at all the TED Talks and everything, study companies like Whole Foods, and we found Simon Sinek. Everybody heard of Simon Sinek, the Golden Circle? I reached out to Simon. I just sent him a note, and he responded back. And it was a wonderful thing. I got to sit down with him and meet with him. And he said, he took me through a philosophy, which I will never forget because I think it's such a powerful thing, where he said, the brain is made up of 4 chemicals. Very logical, it's science. Dopamine and endorphins. Those are the things that are very short term. They drive you towards a plan, they drive you towards a goal. And it's how business is wired today. Many of the things that John talked about. It's how business is driven. Hit a goal, hit a plan, drive for the next goal, drive for the next plan, quarter by quarter by quarter. Yet the brain also has 2 other chemicals, which are serotonin and oxytocin. How you feel, your gut, how you go with your gut. Those things that are really, really critical to bring your whole brain to work. And what business didn't allow us to do is bring that whole brain to work in any kind of methodical way. So what we said is we needed to change our way in which we thought about transformation. And what we did was we said, let's get everybody to bring their whole brain to work. So we had a restart. We went back and we said, how are we going to really activate purpose beyond this articulation of building a better working world? And we began to challenge ourselves. And what we learned was we had to do a better job helping our employees understand what it meant every day. What was their role in delivering, building a better working world? And we unpacked it for them. And we said, the better the question, the better the answer, the better the world works. And every day we challenge ourselves and the experiences we deliver to our employees to be able to fundamentally deliver building a better working world. When we started this, we were 156,000 employees. We are now the growth leader in our field, and we're 266,000 employees around the world 6 years later. We believe we cracked a code. So what we also did was we said, we have to take this to market because there are amazing companies out there that believe that if you are purposeful, you will drive better business. And that's what we're looking to establish. So that's our story.
Great. So let me ask one question. The idea of purpose has been around for many years, but it seems like it's really getting traction in the marketplace more than it ever has. Sounds like your experiences, companies are anxious to embrace higher purpose at this point. Is that accurate?
I think we are for so many, there's so many reasons that I'd be interested in what the other panelists think of this. Our average workforce, the average age of our workforce is 28 years old. 266,000 employees are millennial, the average workforce. 70% of our workforce are millennial. It's an amazing thing that they request from us every day. They expect us to be purposeful. They expect us to give back in society. And it is really driving a momentum and movement that a lot of our leaders are seeing. We have to change the way we communicate, and we have to lead with purpose in our voice and how we act.
Great. Thank you. Shane, your company, Jackson Healthcare, operates under a purpose that is to improve the delivery of patient care in the lives of everyone you touch, which is a great, classic, terrific purpose. But you're the leader accountable for bringing that to life every day and having it really become real within the culture. And I know your company is growing fast, adding employees. John mentioned mergers, acquiring other companies. How do you make this happen and make it real every day in your company?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I define my job description is to make sure that everyone in the company understands what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. And we call that our vision, our mission, and our strategy. But essentially, that's it. What those things are, and then how their role contributes to that. Right. And so we do it in a lot of ways, but every interaction I have, every meeting I take, if it's not contributing towards one of those three things, then I don't do it. And we start off, we take everyone through a fairly extensive new hire orientation. Every month we do this, and I go and speak to it every time. And one of the big things I talk about in that is our mission. It's what you just said. And I tell people, I'm like, look, this is, we have kind of a unique company. Our strategy is a little different, and what we're trying to accomplish is a little bit unique. But our mission's a little weird. And we have two parts of it, and you just mentioned this. It's to improve the delivery of patient care. That's not weird. Lots of people have that. But we are in a really cool business if you're interested in any kind of purpose beyond yourself, because we literally save lives and heal people every day. Like that's pretty cool. And so that's not the weird part. But the weird part is the improving the lives of everyone we touch. And this is, just maybe a different way of talking about kind of the stakeholder theory. But the point I make to them is we see our business as a means to an ends and not an ends to itself. It is an engine that allows us to give people hands up in every interaction that we have. And some of that manifests in very obvious ways, and some of them in not so obvious ways. I mean, we do a tremendous amount of work with just amazing nonprofits and ministries and philanthropic organizations around the world and in our community, and that's kind of the obvious ways. But a lot of it are some of the things that John mentioned. When you have a mindset of how am I going to improve the life of the person that I'm dealing with right now in a customer situation, when something's gone wrong, like we've done something wrong or customer's done something wrong, whatever that is, something's gone wrong in a customer, and that's your mindset, you'll act one way. If your mindset is how do I make the most money out of this transaction, those are two very different behavior sets. And so my job is to make sure people understand that. And by the way, I tell them in that meeting, I go, look, if this resonates with you, I'm super glad. I hope this is what you expected to get here. But in every new hire orientation we have, I go, I know there's some of you sitting here going, I don't know what that is. Like, that's a little mushy and soft for me, and I'm not so sure about that. I'm like, you need to leave now. You can stay for the free lunch, but after that, you really need to go because you're going to stick out here. Like, you're just not gonna fit in. And so, you know, we try to get a lot of people in that have values that really resonate. The thing I hear on our surveys and everything more than anything else is that the reason people work for us is because they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And so my job is to help them know how to apply that in every interaction they have, whether it's with customers, whether it's with fellow associates, whether it's people in our community. And that's been a pretty good strategy for us.
Yeah. And I think what you touch on there, Shane, the idea that purpose helps people kind of self-select into your company.
Yeah, that's right.
To some extent, versus you, I'm not obviously going to vet them for the fit, but there's a bit of you're attracted to each other about something more than just it's a job and a paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I tell them. If our values don't resonate with you at some level, it's not going to be long before you're either going to opt yourself out or you're going to be opted out because you're just not going to fit in and you're not going to like it here. But the reverse is true, is that for people that resonate with that, they love it and they feel an ownership to keep building this culture that does some pretty amazing things.
Right. Thank you. So Alex, so SunTrust, I understand, has had a purpose in place for about 5 years.
That's right.
With a commitment to be a purpose-driven organization. And I personally heard your CEO, your CFO, and your Chief Human Resource Officer speak at various programs about the purpose and their commitment to it. But your job is really to take that across the entire organization, what's a big organization. Yeah. Can you kind of speak to how that activation of purpose is happening at SunTrust and what the challenges are and the rewards for it?
Yeah, sure can. Interesting story. First of all, for those who don't know, SunTrust's purpose is lighting the way to financial well-being. And we really look at the purpose of purpose being to unlock full human potential and company potential. So the way we look at it is, and I go with images that help me sort of explain how I see this, how you integrate it and unlock this. And that is a bit of an uncapping of this fountain that's deeply rooted in purpose that already existed in our organization from who we were a long time ago. And it's as if when we articulated our purpose, it's like we took the cap off this thing and unleashed this incredible fountain of energy that a lot of our teammates, we call our employees teammates, tapped onto immediately. And we saw that beautifully coming to life. And if you see it, or if you think of it as all of those droplets that come out, these are purpose-infused teammates. The ones those droplets drop back into the pond, they themselves make ripples. And that's really how we've unleashed the power of purpose at SunTrust, I would say. That's the visual. But of course, there's some real programs that we have behind this. And I would say we look at it through two lenses. One is an internal lens and one more external, because as many of you have already said, is it really starts with your employees. And you've got to get them to really believe that this is real. And we were lucky at SunTrust. I would say that we found, after doing this purpose articulation work, that our teammates were already living so much of this from the beginning that it wasn't that hard to get them to believe. But nonetheless, what we did was we started off creating a purpose ambassador program. It wasn't brand ambassadors, it was purpose ambassadors, to make it very clear as a statement in the organization that this was different. And it was unbelievable how many people immediately raised their hands and came out of the woodwork and said, we want to be part of this. This is my calling. This is actually what I've been waiting for. And this program really unleashed some hidden energy in the organization. And now we have up to 500 purpose ambassadors. From what I hear, the only company that has an official purpose ambassador program. Love to find another one that does. And what we're seeing is that they have gotten a platform that's really rare to receive, of a permission to be fully who you are in the organization, how you fully show up at work, and then are allowed to amplify your own purpose. So the next layer that's really come in this year is the looking at what is it, how do teammates show up at work when you allow them to bring their personal purpose drivers to work. So like you all said, show up as a full human being, and then overlay how that connects to the company's purpose. And then we almost have a double amplifier effect through being purpose-driven. So that's really where we are right now on the inside. But it's not good enough just to have this program, so we realized we really need some internal proof points to show that what we're saying is really real. Put our money where our mouth is, literally. And what we found, we said, if we stand for this purpose of lighting the way to financial well-being for everyone, that meant we need to look and actually looking at what are we doing for our own teammates and employees. And we saw that we weren't offering enough. So we created a state-of-the-art financial education program called Momentum On Up. And when our teammates started taking this, we started hearing these stories that were so deeply connected to what the transformation journey is of an individual that finally sees what it means to be personally lighting the way to their own financial well-being. So what we saw was a visceral transformation in our own teammates' DNA, that they could authentically link to what we are and what we stand for. And that started. So this the Purpose Ambassador program with the Momentum On Up financial education program really unleashed this energy and made our teammates really believe that what we said was our purpose is really our purpose. And then the second part is you've got to take it externally and actually gain trust and deliver what you're saying. So for a long time, we didn't articulate externally what we were doing, that we are purpose-driven, but we believed that let's just do and act what a purpose-driven company that has this as its purpose would be doing. And we believe that one of those things was to raise the awareness in America of financial unwellness by launching a movement for financial well-being, which was called On Up. And that movement has launched, is now over 3 million strong. And with that, we found that the internal Momentum On Up program, that education program, was so successful, we said, well, we owe it to bring this out externally and give it to other companies and offer it because we saw such an impact. So now that became a product. So a product becomes a proof point of your purpose. And the same thing with when we said we have to give it to everybody, not just companies, that we now have launched the On Up Challenge, which is a version of the state-of-the-art financial education program, also launched on this On Up platform that's free of charge to everyone. So it's these challenges that we bring to life and actually now align our products and services really through that lens. It becomes an authenticity lens, and that's how we're bringing it to life.
Right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I think there's a theme through what all of you have said, that purpose is a living, breathing, ongoing thing in the organization. And for years, consultants and business worlds talk about mission and values, and how many companies have you seen that have a laminated plexiglass thing on the wall in their lobby of what their mission is or their vision is. But purpose is different, it seems. Can anyone comment a bit on how you're experiencing the difference in those two? And one thing I will say, John, tell me if you disagree, but Conscious Capitalism has terminology, but it isn't really saying you must use our terminology or your terminology is wrong, or it's really, as you said, it's like an approach to business that's a little different, that we think is better.
We don't expel people for using
Right.
it wrong.
Right. If you want to call a purpose a mission or whatever, that's all fine. But purpose seems that it's just a different entity. Can you kind of talk about, in your experience, the difference in what purpose does for an organization versus some of those, older ways?
I'm not sure the old ways don't work as well. The difference is that so oftentimes in the past, purpose is going to be intrinsic, I think, to the essence of what the organization is. A lot of times companies hire consultants. They come in and they write up a mission statement. Well, we got to get with this purpose thing. We got to get with this mission statement. So they'll write something up, as you say, laminate it and put it on the wall. Nobody reads it because they're not living it. Purpose has to be authentic. It has to be at the core of what the business exists for. It's back to why do we exist? Why are we here? you got to ask those questions. And then when you really align with it, and your business is authentically connected to why you exist, as she said, very, very articulately, I might add, that unleashes quite a bit of energy and passion. I think that's the difference. One's lived and authentic, and the other one is just some consultants that plastered on the wall because I got to get with this purpose thing.
And now the consultants are coming around too, Cheryl. We're all awake now.
As a consultant, I did not do that. Guilty as charged. I've developed a lot of missions in my life and a lot of
I didn't charge you with anything.
No charges.
I'll take it. But it's such an interesting point because it does very quickly become a platitude in an organization, and you see it all over the walls, and people just walk by it every day, and it disappears. So it's something that you absolutely, and I loved Alex's words, you have to activate. You have to bring it to life, and then it takes on a life of its own, but you have to continue to nourish it every day.
I think this is where leadership, this is where it intersects.
Right.
Because, Gandhi said you have to be the change that you wish to see in the world. We have to embody the purpose. If you're the leaders of your organization, you have to be the purpose. You're a living example of it. Because people, they make their decisions about whether they're going to commit or not based not on what you say, but how you show up, what you do. And if you're living the purpose, if you're embodying it, then that helps unleash it through the whole organization because people think, well, I'm not going to be punished, or I'm not, this. Sometimes people are punished in companies for actually trying to be ethical and stick to the purpose that the company articulated, and they end up getting fired. And so because companies aren't living it, right? So it's leadership's job to make sure that purpose is real, and we do that every day by the way we show up.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I do hear a lot more about this than I have in years past, and at one level it makes you a little nervous to say, okay, so all the literature says that the millennials really want to do business with companies that have higher purpose and that sort of thing. So, hey, let's go get a higher purpose so we can sell to millennials, right? And so, and at some level you go, well, okay, at least maybe now they have a higher purpose that's better than not having one, and okay, fake it till you make it. I don't know. But I think there's something really to this that I think people today, especially millennials, are super attuned to authenticity. Right. And I've told some other people that, look, if you are going to come up with a purpose statement, a set of values, whatever you want to use there, and it is different than what your leaders believe, you are better off not doing it, because your associates, employees, your customers, whatever, they know what your purpose is, and they know it because of the decisions that you make demonstrate them. Your values and beliefs are lived out through the decisions you make and the actions that you take, and regardless of what you say, people are going to know what your actual values are, and there is a real danger of saying one thing and doing something else. That's what's called hypocrisy, and I think we have a culture now that is more attuned and against hypocrisy than perhaps ever before, and so I think at one level, yeah, maybe fake it till you make it, but boy, make sure you're consistent.
I think that's the real value and purpose, though. It does drive decision making. It drives how you treat your suppliers. It drives how you treat your partners. It is what you stand for, why you exist. It drives purchasing decisions, why you buy another company or merge with them. They stand for what you stand for, and it provides that guide for leaders to make better decisions and for employees to engage in those decisions with you. I think that was very, very well said, and I think that's the art of activating purpose. To me, is if you can strongly articulate that purpose, that's one thing. But if you can activate it, that's where the special sauce comes from that allows you to lead in an environment that is very, very controversial today and very, very disrupted. This is the thing that I think will carry companies through to play a long-term game instead of these short-term rules that are imposed on business every day. I think that's very well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to just add that I think, to me, it's really the ultimate foundation. Like, it isn't one or the other, whether you're, you've got your values you're talking about or the other. They don't conflict. In our view, it really is such a solid foundation that makes the others make more sense. And it actually almost has this glue and amplifying effect that people can finally relate to the values and mission like the statements we've made much more, because it's that purifying lens of purpose that I think just clarifies it.
We have a pretty hard stop around 9 o'clock here, which I wish we had a little more time to continue this. But let me ask one quick question, quick response from each of you. How do you know there's business value from purpose?
We can talk about results.
Okay.
I would say right away we can see lower turnover, higher engagement. We see brand consideration is up. We see revenues up. We see all sorts of metrics, business metrics that are up when we correlate it straight to when we implemented purpose 5 years ago, and we're tracking right along with it.
Great.
Specifically, I get asked this question all the time. There's a lot of leaders who go down the purpose route potentially for the wrong reason. To Shane's point, they're going down it because they have to go down it because somebody's caught on that this is a cool thing to do, and that their employees need something else. When in actual fact, companies that are truly purposeful and can activate it are showing significantly higher levels of retention, like SunTrust. They're 1.4 more times likely to engage their employees and retain them, 3 times more likely to retain them. Then there's the offshoot of how their customers engage and purchase, and 82% more likely to buy brands that are purposeful and genuinely authentic about it. And in firms of endearment, great statistic in there, about 10 times more likely to outperform the S&P 500. There's a lot of great statistics. We launched the Beacon Institute in 2015 in Davos to take purposeful companies, baseline them, and over the next 10 years, really put together something that is consistent for the marketplace to show how purposeful companies are outperforming on every index. But it is absolutely factual that they outperform in so many ways.
I mean, the statistics are on your website, the Ernst & Young Beacon Institute piece for folks that are interested. So, great.
I would make the argument, and I'll try to make it quickly, that it's actually the only logical strategy for long-term success in business. So I love the concept of servant leadership. I love the concept of win-win negotiations, that sort of thing. But I struggle a little bit with the terminology, and here's why. I would argue that servant leadership is a redundant phrase. I would argue that win-win, there is no transaction that is not win-win, else the transaction wouldn't happen. John said this earlier. In a capitalistic society, all transactions are voluntary. In a capitalist system, especially in one that is evolved as ours, and in a country, in an economy that's as affluent as ours, transactions are voluntary. The people that work for you, if you are a leader, do so voluntarily. It's indentured servitude went out a long time ago. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. They do something voluntarily. If you are not, as a leader, doing something to help them achieve their goals and objectives, guess what? You will not be their leader very long. They will opt out of that. If you are doing transactions with your customers, whatever else, your other stakeholders, your suppliers, and they are not win-win, guess what? There will not be a second transaction. In limited markets, you can get away with that for a while. In ours, you can't. If you are not seeking some of these things in your business, in today's economy, and I think what's coming in the future, you're not going to get to be in business. That would be my argument.
Great.
I'll say something a little different. He says that servant leadership is redundant because leadership should be inherently about service, right? I would argue conscious capitalism is redundant.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, this is what capitalism is all about. I mean, I've had people tell you, I don't understand, you're not really saying anything new. Exactly.
Here. On that note.
John, this may be selfish for the Conscious Capitalism chapter, but can you briefly on that note, what do you see chapters accomplishing? What can Conscious Capitalism Atlanta accomplish in this market that you would view as success and as an advancement of conscious capitalism?
Again, I think business is fundamentally good. It can be better. We can accelerate it. It's going to evolve. Shane put it pretty very articulately. Purpose is going to be an ante to be in the game, ultimately. Whole Foods is now competing. In the old days, we just competed against a bunch of old-time supermarket companies, and those guys were mostly out of business. Now we're competing against more conscious businesses. So it becomes more difficult to win strictly on purpose. It's kind of like, well, if you don't have that, then you might as well not even show up because you're going to get out-competed in the marketplace. So there's what I would expect the chapters to do is people, we need community. I mean, because these ideas are important ideas, and they're still not orthodox ideas. They're still seen, as you said, a question earlier, Chris, which is, what do you say to the person that says this is kind of all a bunch of bullshit? In the real world, business is tough, and it's idealism stuff, and it's all soft, and blah, 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 blah. A lot of people see it that way. So we're a community of people that have kind of woken up, and part of our job is to help other people wake up. And we wake up quicker when we're together. I found this conversation personally very stimulating. My panelists, I got a bunch of ideas bouncing around like probably you do, but I'm going to go think about and write down. That's why we come together, because we share our experiences. We share the way we think about it. That helps us all learn and grow. It helps us accelerate it. So a good chapter is about helping each other, in service to each other, become better business people, more ethical, more successful, and fundamentally just helping elevate humanity for good. That's the higher purpose of conscious capitalism, and that's why we come together.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm looking at Bobby Turner. Bobby Turner is the Southeast President for Whole Foods, another sponsor of the event today, so thanks to Bobby. I know you and John have a plane to catch. We have time for a few questions here real quick, or two? That's what I thought. So real quick, a couple of questions. Here, Elaine.
Thank you all for being here. And John, it's a question for you specifically. You've obviously had a wild ride and huge success over the years. I think what's most impressive, among a lot of other things, but how you stayed so grounded and authentic. Any advice for just how you stay grounded and how you take care of yourself? Because I think self-care is a big part of the ability to tap into purpose.
I really do believe, again, I think the leader, you have an ethical responsibility to absolutely be the highest version of yourself. You do. I mean, because you're a representative of your business, of your community, of conscious capitalism, and so that means you have to take care of yourself, because if you're sick, then you're a bad example. So health is very important. Obviously, I'm in the health food business, so I try to actually eat the talk. But I mean, I'm 100% plant-based. I do follow a vegan diet. I eat whole foods. I exercise. I meditate. I do yoga. I travel too much. The hardest thing about keeping your health, if you're on the road as much as I am, it's just more difficult. And I'm 64, not too far from 65, and my wife says, you might start practicing a new word, John. And what's that? No. Because like probably everybody in the room, you're always being asked to do things, and I'm not as good at saying no as I probably should be. But I think taking care of yourself is very important, because I mean, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And business, you can kill yourself. You literally can. I know I've worked some long hours over the years. We've got to take care of ourselves.
Great. One more. I'm going to point to this table, but I'm not sure which one.
Actually, John, so corporate social responsibility, do you think is a greenwashing tool, these initiatives that companies are having, or maybe a way to achieve conscious capitalism as a business plan?
I mean, conscious capitalism is inherently socially responsible. But social responsibility oftentimes is equated to philanthropy. And I think it's important that businesses be philanthropic in their communities. This is, I part company with some who say, you know, business is only about, you know, just creating value for shareholders. I think we have, I think that's good business. If you should do your philanthropy just as strategically as you do any other part of your business. And we should do it in such a way that all the stakeholders win through your philanthropy. That's a challenge I'll put to you. Think through your philanthropy. How do all of our stakeholders win, including the investors, when we're philanthropic? But in terms of corporate social responsibility, I mean, Shane said, fake it till you make it. Said that a few times. You know what? If it gets people thinking to be more socially responsible, that's a good thing. Is it sometimes used by corporations for greenwashing? Absolutely. So, I mean, oftentimes I'll ask when people talk about social responsibility, how does it report up? Generally, if it reports up through the public relations team, you got greenwashing. If it reports up through operations, you probably have something authentic there.
Great. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you so much.